Welcome everyone to this session at Tech Leads Venue 2022. I'm going to cover today the consulting mindset and behaviors of world-class consultants. It may be that you're just interested in learning about how consultants think and operate, or it may be a career progression that you're interested in. Either way, I think you'll find this a valuable session. So let's go over the agenda. We're going to do a quick about me. Then I'm going to go through the majority of the presentation is what I consider the top 15 mindsets and behaviors of top consultants. After that, we'll go over, do you have what it takes? What I think are current areas that are prime for consulting right now. Then is it for you? Even if you have what it takes, doesn't necessarily mean it's for you. But if it is, or something that you want to pursue, I end with a list of things that you can do now. So that's the agenda. Real quick, I am the Chief Innovation Officer at Growth Acceleration Partners. I've been here about 2 years now. I lead the GAP Transformation Services team. So we help advise customers on cloud migration, cloud native development, application modernization, application assessments, data as a product, things like that that are really driving and going to move their business forward. I'm a software engineer, been so since I graduated from college a long time ago. I started in the petroleum industry. I've worked in enterprise software. People like talking about my gaming expertise or experience in over a decade at Electronic Arts. And of course, I've worked in the consulting space. I've been a cloud architect since 2011, which was pretty early on in the days of AWS. I think it started in 2008, but 2011 for me is when I jumped on the cloud train. My consulting experience, most recently with GAP, that is my role as leading the team that does that, including consulting myself. Prior to that, I did consulting at IBM for some very large customers around the world. And I've also done a stint as an independent consultant earlier in my career. So that's a little bit about me and my background. First things first, this presentation and this talk today is about technology consulting, not business consulting. So what I mean by business consulting is someone is trying to transition from selling shoes to candy bars. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about using technology as a strategic advantage to drive your business forward and needing help and consulting to make that happen. The second one is just a kind of a level set here. These engagements are typically very strategic in nature. So they're not talking about Java best practices or performance tuning for Postgres or Oracle databases. Those are much more, they're very important, but they're more tactical in nature and not as strategic as the things that we'll be talking about here today. I see the typical career progression of a consultant starting out as a novice, but we all start out in anything. After a while, we become a practitioner, so it becomes second nature to us. We're pretty good at it. We're getting paid for this now. We advance from practitioner and we become an expert at something, meaning that we have skills that are pretty rare and that a subset of the people in our field are able to perform. And then the last one is a graduation from that would be a consultant, where I am applying my expertise to help others become successful. And so some people may stay at practitioner their entire career. Some people may evolve to expert and say, I don't want to become a consultant because of the things that entails that I don't really want to sign up for. There's no right or wrong, but in my career, this is the typical progression on how to become a consultant, or the natural path. Okay, here's the meat of the presentation. We're going to go through the top 15 consulting mindsets and behaviors, one by one, not in any particular order of importance. I had like 25 at first, and then I pared it down and narrowed it down to the 15 that I thought were the best ones. Number one, Consultants are defined by the success or failure of their client. This is their mentality and their mindset. There are no hollow victories. What I mean by a hollow victory is, let's say you had a very lucrative engagement. You worked on a project for 6 months, were compensated very well, and you don't have to work for another 6 months or maybe no longer than that. So you did well, but the project failed. So there is no victory in that. You are defined by the success or failure of your client that you have advised. So that's the first one, and probably one of the more important ones, and definitely the mindset of a consultant that is different than a non-consultant. Number two, a consultant focuses on tying technology solutions to business value. Always, always, always. So if you think about the things that we've been a part of or the projects that we have implemented, not always is it very clear on what the business value of that was. So that's where a consultant is going to start. So let me give you an example here. Here's a non-consultant. We can migrate you from on-prem to AWS. It will take 6 people in 8 months for a cost of $500,000. Now, does that look terrible? No, we see stuff like that all the time, right? And that the customer would then think about that and evaluate whether or not this is what they wanted to do, and then decide or ask more questions, what have you. But that's a non-consultant approach. A consultant would say, your move from on-prem to cloud will result in a 10% increase in revenue and 25% reduction in cost, making the break-even point for this investment 9 months. It's a big difference there, right? So if you look at the first one, that's pretty easy to get. If you look at the second one, that's not easy to get. You got to do some research, and you have to collaborate with the customer on what it is they're looking to achieve from a business perspective. And then the big question is that true? Can I prove that with confidence? I can throw stuff out there like that, but if they shoot holes in it immediately, I'm dead in the water and I look like an idiot, right? So then they end up choosing something else because they don't have confidence in me or my ability. So typically a consultant will work directly with customers to figure out what are the business objectives they're trying to achieve, and then back into this investment period and communicate this in terms of business value. Big difference. Number three, along similar lines as business value, they can communicate in terms of investment and a return on that investment, not cost. You know, cost is a sunken thing and it's a 4-letter word, right? So we stay away from that and we emphasize it's an investment. If I go back up a slide, you can see the difference in the first one is a cost, and the difference in the second one is an investment. And it even mentions the word investment. So if you were on the C-suite, a member of the team evaluating if you're going to use this consultant and embrace their approach, one of these is like, okay, $500,000, I'll think about it. The other one says, hey, this is an investment. We're going to get paid on this back in 9 months. And after that, all of the benefits are ours to own forever. So this becomes, how soon can we get started? Because I want to break even in 9 months. So that's the difference in investment versus a cost. Now I have a fun little thing here where I list some things from a personal perspective, just to kind of highlight the difference when we start thinking about these things, because it is harder to communicate in terms of investment. So look at this list of things that I put on here. First of all, personal Udemy courses. Is that an investment or a cost? I would say that's an investment in your career and in your education and training that's going to have a return on that investment with your additional skills. A Netflix subscription, probably a cost. Books on AWS, Azure, GCP, investment. What about a subscription to MIT Technology Review? It's one of my favorites. Investment. What about a gym membership or a personal trainer? I would say that's an investment in my health that is going to have a return on that investment, which I feel better, I live longer, everything like that. What about a public cloud migration? Is that an investment or a cost? And I don't know. We don't know enough about that situation to know if it's a good investment or not. What about converting from a monolithic app to microservices? Is that an investment or a cost? Also, I don't know. You might have a monolithic app that is working fine, that is never touched and never changed, and don't even mess with it. It's fine. What is the benefit of merging that or converting that to microservices? If it's unclear, it's more of a cost. If it is clear, it's an investment. So this is the kind of mindset and thought process a consultant goes through by focusing on investment over cost. Number 4, a consultant has a point of view. And we'll talk about, well, the first thing you're going to ask me is, what makes a good point of view, and how do I get one, and how does it stand out, and is it really necessary? The good consultants have strong points of view that they share with the customers to gain credibility and to get their confidence. So I'll give you an example. First of all, let's go through what I think makes a good point of view. First of all, it's non-obvious. So none of this, I believe data should be stored in a database. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Insight, for that. That's very obvious, and that's not a good point of view. But what about one that is interesting, that leads to tell me more by the customer or potential client? That's a strong characteristic of a good point of view. The next one is it's controversial. So maybe it's a very delicate topic in today's world, and there's many of those, and you choose a side on that. You're an outlier because you have an opinion that's different than the majority. That's a good candidate for a strong point of view. The next one is it's backed by experience and stories. If I have a point of view but can't back it up with experience and situations that I've been in that resulted in that point of view, it's hollow. It carries no weight. They won't listen to it. They won't believe it. So it's got to have backing that sticks to it, that makes them want to learn more about it. And the last one is it's yours. So it's not some blog post that you liked and you agreed with. It's something that you gained through experience on a project, and you thought enough about it to take a stand on it and said, here's my point of view on this. For those issues that customers are challenged with, it might be, going, Kubernetes and containers versus serverless. It might be something like that. It might be, should we develop in a cloud agnostic format and be multi-cloud instead of being all in on cloud native? Good scenarios or situations in which would a point of view would be helpful to them. That's the bottom line, is it's helpful to them and you feel very strongly about it. So if I go over some sample point of views here, these are mine. I'd be glad to talk to anybody about these because I believe in them. I believe in a serverless first development approach for most workloads. That is true. Here's another one. I think making workloads work across public cloud providers is something rarely worth the effort. That's another one. You'll notice I use some very distinct words here, like on the first one, most workloads. I didn't say all. And on the last one here, the second one here, rarely worth the effort. I didn't say never worth the effort. I said rarely. So you don't want to necessarily be dogmatic about it, but you do want to take a stand on something that could be a very controversial topic. And then an easy one here I put in the middle. I think multitasking is a productivity killer. Now that sparks some conversations where people are like, how can you get through the day without multitasking? And then we have a very fruitful discussion about you might not be able to avoid it, but there's a lot of evidence that says if I do one thing to completion instead of multiple things at one time, then I get a lot more done. That's a fun conversation to have. But those are sample point of views that are very basic, but just gives you an example of some of the things we're talking about. A consultant will have a point of view. The next thing is they tell stories. So they have an extensive list of stories that reinforce their point of view. Like I said, without it, it's a hollow point of view that doesn't gain much credibility. So I have a couple references down here. I really recommend these. The first is How to Tell a Story. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the podcast called The Moth, but it is a free podcast where it's basically storytelling and they have competitions. So the actual art of telling a story has a lot to it that it would be worth, it'd be worth the read, in my opinion. The next one is by a guy who has won that competition 5 times and has some amazing stories. And he goes through the anatomy of how you tell a story. And so whether or not we're telling a story to our wife or to our kid or to a business contact or a potential customer, the anatomy of a strong, persuasive, influential story is the same. And so the better that you can become at that is only going to help you in the world of consulting. So here's a couple for me. Let me tell you about my last modernization project. Well, if you were a client interested in modernization, you would be interested in that. Or I recently helped a company put their data to use by, data as a product strategy. Would you like to hear about how we did that and all the lessons learned in the process? Or this one gained a lot of popularity: how I survived the surge of a massive game launch. When 5 people show up at the same time and start exercising a service in the cloud, that's a big challenge, technical challenge, as well as a business challenge. And I would love to tell you how I survived the surge on that. Those are stories that reinforce a point of view and that gain you credibility through your experience. Number 6, consultants obsessed with adding quantifiable value on every engagement. So non-consultants can get by without it, but not consultants. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're an employee, you can occasionally, I've been an employee more than I've been a consultant, right? You can occasionally coast on some days and maybe half a day here or a couple hours here or there. When you are a consultant, you are being scrutinized and evaluated the entire time. You have to add quantifiable value, meaning it is clearly known that the value that you provide on the engagement every day. And knowing that impacts your daily behavior, impacts your to-do list, impacts your strategy for interacting with the customer. You have to add this value because you are perceived as more valuable to them, so they're paying more attention. Number 7, a consultant can go with the flow and pivot as necessary. I have a question up here, but it's more of a statement the way I worded it. The number of times when the consulting engagement went precisely as expected in my career is 0. So things change, and they always change. The question is, how nimble and agile can you be? Can you pivot and go with the flow and still add value and still help them solve their problem and still help them get to the promised land in spite of those changes? So when you think about what changes, company strategy. This happened on one engagement. We had a very big consulting engagement, and the customer ended up getting a large contract with a new customer that changed their whole strategy. It happens, but we could still help them with that, even though there was a change. People come and go. The longer the project lasts, the odds of that are greater. You might have had people that were ambassadors for the engagement that are no longer on the project anymore, or the opposite, or you started out interacting with 8 people and now there's only 4. That happens all the time. Commitment level. It starts out very committed. The next thing you know, you feel like it's a little loose on the commitment. So how can you regain that level of commitment and dedication to the project? These are very typical things that change. And then my comment here at the bottom is no special insights here. This is pretty obvious, but the longer a project lasts, the more changes will occur. So if you can emphasize speed in the completion of the project and require their interaction and their collaboration heavier or more often for a shorter period of time, you can shorten that project window and then negate or minimize the odds of changes happening that are going to cause you to pivot and constantly change direction. Number 8, consultants are strong communicators. not only are they strong communicators, but they invite challenges to their ideas. It's one thing to put ideas and recommendations out there and then to feel very defensive when they're challenged. A good consultant will put recommendations or ideas out there and say, shoot holes in this. Why won't this work? Because they are obsessed with getting it right, not necessarily being right. And there's a big difference to that. So when we talk about communication, strong verbal, strong written, nowadays, back and forth on the email, submitting ideas and collaborating is very common. Whether or not you're in a group in a presentation to a board of directors, or you are meeting with an individual who's a DevOps lead and wants to know more things about some of the recommendations that you've made. Could be the C-suite, and finally, it could be an individual contributor. So like I just mentioned. But the key here is that they're typically good at all of these, and that's only a result of a lot of practice. So I can tell you, I had an engagement earlier this morning. I get nervous before each one of these. If you're not nervous, something's wrong, right? It's not like you just start like, oh, this is second nature to me. I get nervous and I kind of convert that energy, that nervousness into some positive energy, but I get it every time. And I hear that performers who are musicians feel the same way, even though they've been on stage for 20 years type thing. So the idea here is, message here is to get a lot of practice on this and actually seek opportunities to do more of each of these, whether or not you're doing a podcast to the general public or you're presenting a PowerPoint deck to your team internally. Seek out opportunities because you are constantly upping your game the more that you do this. Number 9, they rely on things that they know while learning about things that they don't. So I have not been on a project where I knew everything that needed to be known to be successful on the project. I just haven't. But every time when I learn about those things, now I know more on the next project, and I've added those skills to my arsenal. So I'll give you an example here. Was on a project with a medical company, and they had a lot of requirements around FHIR, FHIR, and HL7 APIs. If you're in the healthcare space, you probably know all about these. I knew nothing about these. So a more of an amateur consultant would have been like, hey, I'm not really a good candidate for this project because I'm not really versed in these things. But it turned out only a small aspect of that project involved expertise on these 2 areas. So all the rest of it was in the wheelhouse. So let's emphasize the wheelhouse while educating ourselves on the things that we have a slight gap in. And then we're constantly filling gaps and adding skills to our arsenal for the next project. That's the way they do it. Number 10, consultants take ownership of personal education and training. One of my favorite quotes that exists in the world is by William Johnson that says, if it's to be, it's up to me. So we have a lot of resources that are available today, whether or not it's Udemy. I'd be not ashamed to admit the number of skills I acquired by paying $9 for a class and then received 28 hours of instructional videos. Love it. Cloud Guru, YouTube, my go-to for many things as well. So, but the point of it is that the consultant is like, I'm in charge of this. This is my brand. And it's up to me to get better at these things. And they don't need any prodding or codding to do so. They have the initiative to do these things on their own. Number 11, has an open mindset. And I like this quote here, speak as if you are right and listen like you could be wrong. So this is a delicate line to walk, right? We talked about, hey, I have a point of view and I'm going to take a controversial stand on a topic here. But now you're telling me, Dave, I got to have an open mindset. That's true. And that's why it's a relatively delicate line to walk because you don't know everything. We'll see that one in a second. And there's always going to be something that could change that would influence your opinion and influence your recommendation. So I will give you a little test question here and I'll walk you through this. So cloud vendor XYZ, I specifically chose a fictitious one for this since it was going to be aired in the public, is in last place in the cloud wars and market share. As a cloud migration consultant, would you recommend a customer migrate to the XYZ cloud? Here's a few very important items of information. You know very little about XYZ. You've never moved anyone to the XYZ cloud, and you've read horror stories about XYZ cloud. So yes or no, would you sign up for a project to migrate them, or would you recommend that they consider migrating to XYZ cloud? Okay, I didn't give you all the facts, and that was intentional to emphasize my point. Here's the additional facts of the story that emphasize being open-minded. They're already an XYZ shop. Their entire tech stack is XYZ. XYZ can handle their workloads. Migration will be very easy. XYZ on-prem to XYZ cloud. Doesn't get easier than that. And XYZ company gave them a killer deal and incentives. So very different picture now that we have. And the answer to that question should be maybe. We've gone from probably a no, a definite no. I hear nothing but horror stories. I've never done it before. They're in last place. What a loser. To new information here, because I'm open-minded, to now it's a maybe. So what about me doing the migration, since I've never done an XYZ migration before? So the next step, what I would recommend is do the best thing for your client, not the thing that you might be best at. That's what a consultant does. Now, go learn about XYZ cloud and get a migration under your belt and add that to your arsenal. So for you attendees that have public cloud experience, I don't even care which one it is or multiple, but as you, just like databases, there is so much, so many similarities between multiple cloud providers that this to me would not be an overwhelming undertaking. The fact that I was not XYZ cloud certified would not be a reason that I would not entertain taking this project, right? I know 2 other clouds. Now I just have to know the differences in the lingo for XYZ cloud. So, but the key thing here is if I was only an Azure, GCP, or AWS migration, and I channel them to that platform, I'm channeling them to the thing that I'm best at, not necessarily the thing that's best for them. And that's the difference. Number 12, consultant focuses on improving every day, even just a little. So at some point during the day, every day, we're going to move that football down the field, even if it's a yard, half a yard, quarter of a yard, we're going to work on something. And that something may come during business hours if we're lucky. It may not, which is probably more typical, but it could be any of the things that are going to be in the self-improvement category. I'm studying for a certification, which I am right now. I'm taking a speech class to get better in front of crowds, another good one. I'm submitting a story to the Moth to get their feedback on how my storytelling is going. I'm mentoring someone junior, that's making me better and making them better. Or I'm asking for feedback, very radical candor, direct feedback that's going to make me better. So they do this and they do it every day, and even a little advancement every day, when you think about it over the course of a month, 6 months, a year, turns into big, big advancements. 13, they don't know everything. And they don't act like they do either. Nobody likes that person, right? But here's the thing, they do know a lot, and they figure out how to get the knowledge they need to help their client. So they're typically deep in one or a few areas and broad in others, but they deep dive and they get those skills in the areas that they need to help the client. Very similar to the FHIR and HL7 type stuff, right? But the point here is they don't act like they know everything either. They will share what they know, and they'll ask questions about the things that they don't. Pride is concerned with who is right. Humility is concerned with what is right. A strong, talented consultant would be the latter of these two. Not obsessed with being right, more about getting it right. Number 14, they can break difficult technical topics down and explain them to non-technical people. I will tell you, as a technology consultant, the vast majority of my clients are not that technical. So they're relying on someone that can break these things down for them and explain them in terms that they can understand. So here's my example here. I can't think of one that's more difficult, to be honest with you. How would you explain the value of Kubernetes to your grandma? Very, very difficult, right? I can't think of one that's more difficult. My wife and I were on a walk. My wife is in sales. She's a non-technical person. We were on a walk a few months ago, and I tried to explain the difference between containers and virtual machines. 4 miles later, we weren't any closer to any understanding. So that helped me kind of try to polish my game a little bit on how to help break down a difficult topic into one that's more understandable for non-technical people. So back to this question, how would you explain the value of Kubernetes to your grandma? I don't have a good answer for that, but I do know by focusing on the business benefits, don't you dare mention pods or services to your grandma, right? You got to focus on the business benefits. And so if you're talking about Kubernetes to a CEO or a high-level executive, what are the business benefits of Kubernetes? You know, that's an interesting question by itself. It has them. Can you articulate them in a way that makes them interested in doing something about it? So focusing on the business benefits is the underlying key to breaking down difficult technical topics. And 15, it's last, but it shouldn't be last in importance. They ask a lot of questions, a lot. So a consultant is much less likely to make declarative statements than to ask questions. And usually you can identify them in a room by the person that's asking the most questions. So that is a very typical behavior of a seasoned consultant. Okay, a couple more areas here. We're on time. Technology areas that are prime for consulting. First, monoliths to microservices. You know, keep in mind, each one of these has something in common, right? It's complicated. So if it wasn't complicated, they wouldn't need help. But things that are complicated that typically executives are struggling with the number of choices, the number of different opinions, don't know which direction to go, raising their hand for help are prime areas for consulting. So monoliths and microservices, not easy. Done a few of those in my life, and no two went the same. Big challenge that is a hotbed for consulting right now. Application modernization, related somewhat to the above. Are they going to pursue cloud native development? Are they looking at using containers or serverless model and no ops approach to benefit their business? They need help here. The next one, automation. Anything that when we're talking about involves computers taking the place of human resources, you have their interest, right? Because either they have staff shortages or they can't find talent or they can't keep talent. So automation is a real hot topic right now and they need help. Just think about the number of options that are available. And this might be, whether or not it's Ansible, a tool like Ansible automation, or you're focusing on infrastructure as code and using Terraform to replicate environments and to make infrastructure changes much easier. Big opportunity there that's prime for consulting. The next one that we're seeing a lot of is data as a product. Companies have been sitting on this data that they have, and they have realized that their most precious asset could also be converted into new lines of revenue if they could figure out what to do with that. And so how do you do that? Especially if they don't have any expertise or they don't have a team of data scientists or SQL ninjas or machine learning or AI, if that's even required. So usually they start with nothing other than databases that have terabytes and terabytes of information that they say, how can we convert this into data as a product strategy that would create new revenue lines for our business? Very hot one right now. The best area, in my opinion, for technology consulting is something uniquely you. So what are you passionate about that you can't believe you get paid for to work on? That would be a good candidate. What is something that you want to be the best in the world at? You know, I say best in the world, but if you strive to be the best in the world and you ended up in the top 100, that's pretty dang good. Right? You're the top 100 in the world at something, which is amazing. That could lead to a very rewarding consulting career. And then I have my last line here that if you're not good at it, you're not passionate about it, it's probably not your thing. So I wouldn't sign up to be a data as a product consultant if I'm like doing it for the potential monetary rewards and I wasn't really passionate and stoked every time I created data as a product solution, right? So probably not your thing. If it's not your thing, you're not going to be good at it. You're not going to be one of the best in the world at it. You're going to fail as a consultant. So the best thing you can do is focus on something that that you are passionate about, and you want to be one of the best in the world. Okay, so is it for you? I have here a few questions for you. Do you like leveraging your expertise to help others be successful? There are certain points in my career where I would say no to that. I just wanted to get good at something, and I found it very rewarding to do my job, whether or not it was, develop software that was to be sold or scaling a game to support millions of concurrent users, right? So there isn't any wrong answers to these. It's only if it's good candidate for you to be interested in being a consultant. Do you like very hard challenges? Not knowing everything, but figuring things out. That's where you're in a uncomfortable position where you have to embrace that discomfort to break through there and to get the results you're looking for. There are certain people that like, give me the next hard challenge. And there are others that are like, okay, I need a break now. That one about killed me and I'm not ready to start a new one right now. So it depends. Do you like being responsible and accountable for very strategic advice? That's not for everybody. So you are advising a company and a client on something that's very strategic. And let's just say it's going to make or break their company. They're going to put chips down on what you're telling them to do. So are you comfortable with that? Do you like that? Do you like seeing the results of that when they are successful, that you had a role in that success? That would be a consulting mindset. And the last one is always learning deeper in areas that you already know, getting deeper in those, and then broader in areas that you don't. And then I have my favorite quote from the US Navy SEALs, which the only easy day was yesterday. No rest for the weary. That you go from one engagement to another, and it's like the frying pan of the fire. That they have some very critical challenges that are very strategic and are make and break for their company. So perfect scenario for those people that want to jump in there and help out. Is consulting for you? I say it's for anyone who has the experience in a certain field, the confidence to convey a point of view, and the grit to see things through to the end. Read that again. Has the experience in a field, the confidence to convey a point of view, and the grit to see things through to the end, while being committed to constant learning forever. Without these, you're going to struggle. So those are the way I would summarize whether or not I would be interested in pursuing a career in consulting. Things you can do now. One, start implementing, whether or not you're going to be interested in being a consultant or not. Some of these behaviors are going to up your game in a non-consulting role. So ask more questions. There's one of the things that you can do right now. Ask more questions and make it a conscious effort to ask more questions. The second one is start focusing on the business benefits to solutions. And that could relate to the first one. You start asking about the business benefits of these solutions, right? Hey, we want to go from Heroku to AWS. What is the business benefit you're expecting on that migration? Very good question, right? That is already up in your game by asking questions like that. 3, take a holistic view of things instead of my world of Node.js and Postgres database. What is the big view that we're trying to accomplish here on how that's relating to increased revenue, decreased costs? Because it's usually one of those two things, or it should be. The next one is gain new skills and enhance your current ones. Always going to be working on that in your current role. And then seek opportunities to communicate more. So sign up to deliver that PowerPoint, even though you weren't the one tasked with it. Sign up to have a collaborative meeting with your user, customer, internal customer. Look for and appreciate these opportunities that you get that are increasing your skills every day. And the last one here, add value every day. And you can just make a simple note to yourself when you hang it up. Say, did I add value today? Was the value I added obvious today? Because even in a non-consulting role, that is a good mentality to have. The next one is read case studies. So what is the challenge? So you read all about the challenge, and then how would you solve it? Stop before you get to their solution and say, what would I do if I were in that position? And then compare. You might have come up with something that's better than them. You might have missed some things that they nailed. But that is one of my favorite things to do is I read case studies. Harvard Business Review is one of my favorites, MIT Technology Review. But I like to stop the article right when I have a good understanding of the problem and then pull out my notepad and then write down questions I would ask and potential solutions, how I would solve the problem. And sometimes I get it really, really wrong. But that's good, right? Now I'm learning things that I didn't know before. So that's good. The next one is seek a mentor that can help guide you. Somebody that's been down the road a little bit, that you're trying to walk. If you can entice someone or convince someone to help guide you down this road, it's just going to make it easier, and they can fill you up with to-dos and things that are going to strengthen you as an individual. And then last, I have you be you. Nobody can compete when you are your authentic self. And that's probably the most important thing, regardless of what role that you are currently in. When I'm me, nobody's better than me. They can't compete with Dave, being Dave. They only compete with Dave when I'm trying to be something else. I'm trying to be like everybody else or trying to do something that's not me. So you be you, and that uniqueness will stand out and separate you from others, because nobody can compete with you when you are your authentic self. Okay, we have 14 minutes left for some Q&A.
Okay, so thank you, Dave. Very spot on conversation. Now, we do have a question from the audience. Philip Heyman says, consulting seems to require you being a generalist, but expertise or specialization is highly desirable and often the most meaningful way you can bring value to an engagement. How do you balance these two things?
That's very difficult. I will say that you can't have, I will say you can be a consultant having very deep expertise in an area, but you'll be limited. You cannot be a consultant having very broad expertise in a lot of areas. So that one you're going to get, you're not going to make it. So the shallow, broad expertise, they can get that anywhere, right? So what they want is the deep level of expertise in a few certain areas, maybe one or two, but that needs to be augmented with expertise in the areas that surround that. So broad in most, deep in a few, but you have to be deep in something greater than zero.
Okay, cool. So hopefully that answers your question, Philippe. We also got a comment from It was an anonymous person. But anyway, back on the explanation to the Kubernetes, to the grandma, he or she said, imagine that you can buy a perfect cake pan and that will make perfect cakes in every oven in the world.
Interesting.
Okay. Not a technique, so I cannot really comment on that one.
Yep.
Okay, we don't seem to have any other question or comments in the chat. So everybody, this is the right time for you to ask any questions or add any comments that you may want.
I will add that, consulting, you may desire being a consultant for a consulting company. You may desire being a consultant for yourself. There are advantages and disadvantages to those that you could easily look up. The main disadvantage of being a consultant for yourself is you have to go out and find your next engagement, and that's no easy task. I've been there, and the value of being your independent consultant is you are at total flexibility and how many projects you take on, how much you want to do, all those things. So there are advantages and disadvantages of each one of those scenarios.
Absolutely. So we do have one more question, this time from Milton. He said, how do you measure business value?
You would work collaboratively with the customer to determine business value. As a technologist, I can't go in, regardless of the technology that I may be good at, and say, here's the business value of that. You have to do some collaborative sessions with the customer to get that, which is why non-consultants don't get it. So I'll give you an example of a recent customer that needed some consulting advisory sessions. They already knew the percentage of people that dropped through the funnel of the process that they had through their getting to their product. For every 1%, they lost $4 million. So I'm like, okay, that is a gold mine of information right there, because now we were charged with applying technology to reduce the funnel dropouts. And so when you say we could eliminate 4%, well, now it's $16 million, right? So it became an easily justifiable thing. How would I know that just walking in there by whatever technology I had in my tool belt? I wouldn't. It's different for everybody. So that's part of the partnership and the collaboration that you have with the client. It's figuring out that together. Because when you do that, when you co-create and you solve these problems together, now you're one of their team. And they perceive you that way as like this trusted technology partner. Without that, you become more of an order taker and more of a contractor implementation specialist. That's different than being a strategic advisor.
Okay, so once again, hopefully that answers your question, Milton. So we keep getting more and more questions. This time we got another one from Jeffrey. He said, you mentioned that you need to be passionate. You mentioned that you need to be passionate. What if you have not found what makes you feel passionate about? How do you recommend, or you recommend jumping from one technology to another until you find it?
Okay, I believe part of that was, is there a technology that I'm not passionate about? Is that one of them?
I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I can't be passionate about everything, and I gotta choose, right? I myself am not passionate about UI UX. So I appreciate those that are. It's not my thing. I'm just not passionate about it, and I delegate that to those people that are, and God bless them, and I need them, right? So that's that. How do you go from something you're not passionate about to finding something that you are? It's a good question. I think exposure to multiple things and multiple technologies is a good way. You might have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find that real thing that you're passionate about. It might be Kubernetes. It might be, Snowflake data warehouse. I don't know. It also depends on if you're a software engineer and you like writing a lot of code, or if you like architecting things. And if you're an architect, you might really be passionate about Terraform and infrastructure as code. It depends. And I know that can be a long search for some people that are working a job because they have skills that pays them. but at the end of the day, they can't wait to get home and be doing something else. It's not a lifestyle for them. It's much more of a job that gets them a paycheck. In that case, keep trying out different things and taking some classes on Udemy for very cheap prices and getting exposed to a lot of different things. Eventually, something will click that you're like, I love this stuff.
Cool. So we got more questions in the chat. This time, Anthony says, how to avoid always going to a specific tool or technology? For example, in the case of the cloud provider, how to avoid going for the one I'm expert in and have certifications on without considering all additional aspects. I feel there's always an inclination to go with what you're familiar with.
You can go with what you're familiar with. And in that case of the example that I gave, let's say you're familiar with, you have 5 certifications on AWS. You probably would have put that company that wanted to go on XYZ cloud on AWS. So you did what was most comfortable to you instead of what was the best thing for the customer. Now, an argument against that would be, hey, I know everything about AWS. And so in my real expert opinion, they would be better off here, but you didn't know about XYZ cloud. So that has a hollow, no credibility type opinion. So the thing is, can you get the skills? Can you figure out what is the best thing for them to do? And hopefully it aligns with the things that you are really good at. Most of the time it does. But that example I gave was just one about being open-minded, because even if I have 5 AWS certifications, there may be scenarios where a customer says, I'm not sure which way to go. And the answer is not, in this case, AWS. That happens. So just be open-minded to that. Still invest in getting that deep expertise. And if I had 5 AWS certifications, would I go for number 6? Yes. Keep going that route and being like the expert in AWS implementations. You may have clients that prefer consulting engagements that have already decided we're going on AWS, but we have these big challenges that we need to solve going from on-prem to the cloud that we need your help on. In that case, slam dunk, right up your alley, because they're not going outside of that area of expertise that you have, and you can help them immediately.
Okay, excellent. So we got more questions. Not sure how many more we can take, but hey, maybe we can just have a couple more. Now,
Okay.
How do you propagate this consulting mindset to the entire organization?
You be the change that you want to see. That's been my approach. So I exhibit the behaviors that I want the organization to have, and through grassroots and osmosis, it is a better way of happening that way than there is by any kind of mandate or type thing. So by communicating the value of this, both for our customers and for individuals, in my experience, I've been in this career for a while. I know that people are interested in anything that makes them more marketable and better. And so I have your attention why a lot of people showed up today, right? This is going to make you more marketable and better, whether or not you become a consultant or not. There isn't anything on that list that I went over that you would say that makes no sense for me to do in my current position. I shouldn't ask more questions or take a holistic view of things and stuff like that. Of course you should. These are up in your game, whether or not you're a software engineer, senior software engineer. These are things that the experts are doing that you can learn from, make yourself more valuable. And that value that you gain will be obvious in conversations that you have with people on your team, with potential interviews that you have in the future. It will make you more valuable and as a team player and as an individual.
Okay, excellent. So we got one more question from Daniel. How to convince a client to go with the plan you are suggesting, even when you are not an expert on the technology they need? Any tips?
How do you convince them to go with a technology that you are not an expert in, but it is one that they need, right? I think Daniel answered the question right there, that it's a one that they need. So now's the opportunity for you to get some skills around that technology. If you really believe that that is the one that they need and you're just not good at it, I raised my hand to you on that. That's a good move because you did the thing that was best for them. Now the question is, are you going to be able to deliver on that project to make it successful? And in that case, I'd say you have some education and training to do and get after it, because don't pass on it just because of that. Get after it, and you can help them, because you'd be surprised how many technologies are so similar in nature that if you're an expert in one and there's a competing technology with that, it would not take you long to become an expert in that either, in my opinion.
Celine, we have 4 more questions. You want me to go on, Dave?
Yeah, let's keep going. Yeah.
Cool. Excellent. So Carlos says, or he asks actually, how can you guarantee a proposal ROI or return on investment?
You necessarily can't guarantee it, but you can back up the numbers that you put there. So you worked with the customer, you said, hey, like the customer told us that, 1% that goes through here, we lose $4 million. That is used in the ROI. So if we get any challenges on that number, that came from the customer. You guys are the ones that said you lose $4 million for 1% of the people that fall through, right? So now, if we implement this, can we guarantee that, we're going to save them $8 million by 2%? Not necessarily, but you can do everything in your power to put together a positive story that says, we feel very confident that we can achieve 2% saving of $8 million by doing these things. And here's why. When you deliver that with confidence, and you can back it up with experience and support, now you're going to get the project. Now we go back to there's no hollow victories. Now let's save them that $8 million, right? Now let's make it be successful, whatever it takes to make that happen. But can you actually guarantee things? I don't think in today's world, definitely you can not, but they're not expecting that either. They're expecting to get a good odds of success, and for you to paint a picture on what that success looks like if they go through with the project.
Excellent. So Juan Mesa says, a more technical matter. What do you think about microservices versus serverless as a way to reduce complexity for customers who want to modernize or upgrade their infrastructure?
Okay. A topic very, very near and dear to my heart. So microservices can be implemented. I mean, serverless is one way to implement them. So I think the question is more like, do we implement microservices in a serverless fashion, or consider something like containers, in which case we would be responsible for infrastructure? I feel very passionately about, I believe most workloads would benefit by a serverless first approach. And by that, I mean, we're going to try serverless first. And if there's some reason why the serverless model is not working, then we'll consider alternatives. But migrating from that to a container for an alternative is not a challenge. So let's try it the easy way and the no ops way first. And if that doesn't work, which there will be scenarios that doesn't work, I've been through them, then we'll consider going a non-serverless route. But I'm all about no ops and no infrastructure and pushing that to the cloud provider. Okay,
Excellent.
one more.
Just one more. Okay, so Jose says, is it common for consultants to hire or work with experts that make up for the lack of expertise in a certain area? I mean, a consulting hiring a consultant for a particular new client or project.
Please repeat that, Daniel.
Is it common for consultants to hire or work with experts that make up for the lack of expertise in a certain area? I mean, a consultant hiring a consultant for a particular new client or project?
Very common. We get some niche scenarios where they have a very specific need, and we don't have the depth in that one area. So we will hire a specialized consultant for that one area that is needed. Very common, happens all the time. So yes. Now that consultant is more of a tactical in nature and is going to be there for a very specific, narrow problem. And it's not typically your holistic, strategic technology partner type thing. is a very tactical type of engagement in those cases.
Okay, excellent. So we
Okay.
have one more question
Yep.
and one more comment. Not sure if we can take those or we can just wrap things up just the way they are.
Let's go one more.
One more. What advice can you give about how to feel more engaged with the business? In my case, I'm unable to feel the same engagement that I would feel with something like entrepreneurship.
What advice to feel more engaged with the business? That's a good one. I think right off the tip of my tongue here, I would say to show interest in the business by asking the people that are in the business more questions about the business. That is going to increase your level of engagement because they might not even know that you're interested in learning about the business. And to be genuine about that is like really concerned and interested in learning more about it, because as a technologist, it will only make you better. So yeah.
Excellent. So this one is not exactly a question, is actually a comment. I just want to thank Dave for sharing your experience and knowledge. Amazing presentation.
Awesome. Well, my email is dmoore@wearegap.com. If anybody has any follow-ups, please let me know. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for your participation today. Just as a friendly reminder, and before we let you guys go, just keep in mind that we have more talks during the week. So thank you once again, and see you the next time.